The night in Seattle was heavy with rain, the kind that drummed relentlessly against rooftops and bounced off the slick, darkened streets. Streetlights cast halos of gold and orange on the wet sidewalks, making the city appear both familiar and strangely mysterious. Most of the city slept, unaware that a single event would ripple through the community, leaving questions, fear, and a desperate search for answers. In a modest apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, the calm of the evening was shattered. A sudden, sharp sound, a door forced open, a faint crash, broke the rhythm of raindrops on glass. Someone had entered. Not with chaos, not with violence aimed to terrify, but with careful, deliberate intent. A struggle had occurred, subtle enough to avoid immediate detection, yet enough to leave traces that would be impossible for investigators to ignore. Time seemed to slow as the neighbor, alerted by the noise, reached for the phone. By the time officers arrived, the apartment was eerily quiet. The door hung slightly ajar, signs of disturbance evident, but nothing overtly gruesome. The air was heavy with tension, the faint scent of damp wood and cold rain lingering inside. This was the start of a case that would challenge every investigator involved. Every object, every movement, every unnoticed detail could hold the key to understanding what had happened. It was a puzzle, and the city itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting to see how it would unfold. At the center of the investigation was Emily Parker, a 28-year-old architect with aspirations of designing some of Seattle's most iconic buildings. She was thoughtful, observant, and quietly ambitious. Her days were a blend of sketches, coffee breaks at her favorite cafe, and late-night walks to clear her mind. Emily lived with her younger brother, Jake, a college student studying computer science, while their parents, Karen and Michael Parker, resided in a nearby neighborhood. To her friends, Emily was dependable and empathetic, someone who noticed the small, significant details others overlooked. Her disappearance, even in a city as large as Seattle, left a void, felt by family, friends, and neighbors alike. On that evening, Emily had left her apartment without her umbrella. Rain soaked her coat as she walked down the glistening streets, the faint sound of cars splashing through puddles accompanying her steps. She paused briefly at the corner cafe to shake off the chill, but did not linger. The routine simplicity of her evening would soon contrast sharply with the extraordinary events that had begun unfolding within her own apartment. By the time the clock struck 7, Emily had not returned home. Concern quickly escalated into alarm. Her mother, Karen, called her phone repeatedly, each unanswered ring amplifying the unease. Police were notified, and patrol units canvassed the neighborhood. Security cameras captured fleeting images, a figure in a dark raincoat moving with purpose toward a nearby park. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to spark the first thread of investigation. Detectives and forensic experts began the meticulous work of piecing together Emily's last known movements, combing through every detail that might explain her sudden disappearance. It was an investigation that would demand patience, keen observation, and relentless determination. Every witness's memory, no matter how fleeting, every item left behind, every trace on the wet pavement became a vital part of the unfolding story. As the rain continued to fall over Seattle that night, the city became both a witness and a silent accomplice to the drama, the streets reflecting the glimmer of uncertainty and the hope that someone would uncover the truth. Emily Parker woke early most mornings, long before the city's bustle reached the streets. Her small apartment was filled with the soft light of dawn filtering through rain-specked windows. She liked the quiet, the way the air smelled after a long night of rain, and the gentle hum of the city slowly coming to life. Her mornings always began with a cup of coffee, black with a dash of cinnamon, sipped while reviewing sketches for ongoing projects. Her desk, cluttered with pencils, rulers, and paper, was a testament to her meticulous nature and her passion for architecture. Emily's work had always been more than a job. She dreamed of designing buildings that would feel alive, spaces that connected people to their surroundings. Her colleagues admired her for her precision and creativity, though some teased her for the endless notes and sketches she carried everywhere. But Emily saw these details as essential, each line, each angle, each measurement a step toward something meaningful. Her family was her anchor. Her younger brother Jake, 21, was studying computer science at the University of Washington. He was quieter than Emily, introspective, often lost in thought or immersed in coding projects. Their pa, Emily Parker, woke early most mornings, long before the city's bustle reached the streets. Her small apartment was filled with the soft light of dawn filtering through rain-specked windows. She liked the quiet, the way the air smelled after a long night of rain, and the gentle hum of the city slowly coming to life. Her mornings always began with a cup of coffee, black with a dash of cinnamon, sipped while reviewing sketches for ongoing projects. Her desk, cluttered with pencils, rulers, and paper, was a testament to her meticulous nature and her passion for architecture. Emily's work had always been more than a job. She dreamed of designing buildings that would feel alive, spaces that connected people to their surroundings. Her colleagues admired her for her precision and creativity, though some teased her for the endless notes and sketches she carried everywhere. But Emily saw these details as essential, each line, each angle, each measurement a step toward something meaningful. Her family was her anchor. Her younger brother Jake, 21, was studying computer science at the University of Washington. He was quieter than Emily, introspective, often lost in thought or immersed in coding projects. Their parents, Karen and Michael, had instilled in both children a sense of curiosity and responsibility. Karen, a high school teacher, was patient and nurturing, while Michael, an engineer, valued logic and structure but also had a subtle, dry humor that made Emily and Jake laugh even on stressful days. Despite the ordinary rhythm of family life, they shared an unspoken closeness, a foundation that made any disruption, like Emily's unexpected absence, feel profoundly unsettling. Emily had a small circle of friends, each drawn to her quiet strength and attentiveness. She often met them at a nearby coffee shop or for evening walks along the waterfront. These walks were more than just exercise, they were a way to reflect, to observe the city, and sometimes to sketch ideas that wouldn't fit in her office. People who knew her described her as perceptive, empathetic, and reliable. Even strangers felt a subtle warmth from her presence, the kind that makes someone remember a smile or a gentle word weeks later. Her daily life was ordinary, yet every detail was significant. The order of objects on her desk, the route she took to work, the time she checked in with friends and family, all small, seemingly mundane patterns that, in the coming investigation, would serve as crucial reference points. These routines, once predictable, now highlighted the stark absence caused by the events of that rainy night. That morning, Emily left her apartment with a sense of calm that belied the storm outside. She had her sketchbook tucked under her arm, her coat slightly damp from the early drizzle, and a small leather bag filled with essentials. Little did she know that the ordinary motions of her day, walking through rain-slicked streets, pausing briefly at a corner cafe, greeting a neighbor, would soon be scrutinized in detail, each moment dissected by investigators searching for answers. Seattle's rain fell steadily, a quiet witness to her movements, reflecting the city's familiar patterns while simultaneously masking the extraordinary event that had begun in her apartment. For Emily, it was just another rainy morning, one that she would never see again the same way. The morning air was crisp, tinged with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Emily Parker awoke with her usual quiet determination, her mind already moving through the day's tasks. She sipped her coffee slowly, savoring the warmth that contrasted with the damp chill outside. The city had a rhythm, and Emily followed it with a practiced precision. She dressed in a light raincoat, adjusted the straps of her bag, and tucked her sketchbook safely under her arm. In her usual haste, she forgot one small thing, her umbrella. The streets of Seattle were slick, reflecting the pale light of street lamps and the occasional headlights of passing cars. Pedestrians scurried under umbrellas, their hurried steps blending with the gentle percussion of raindrops. Emily moved deliberately, her boots making soft splashes as she navigated the puddles along her familiar route. At the corner cafe she often stopped by, she lingered only briefly, nodding to the barista who greeted her by name. Every gesture, though ordinary, was now a thread in the intricate web that would become critical to the investigation. By late morning, Emily had arrived at her design firm downtown. She immersed herself in plans and sketches, her pencil moving with precision across the paper. She spoke with colleagues about upcoming projects, her voice calm, measured, carrying the quiet authority of someone confident in her work yet approachable. Every detail of the office routine, the placement of documents, the sequence of phone calls, even the time she poured her second cup of coffee, was noted by the investigators later as part of reconstructing her last known movements. Around midday, Emily stepped out briefly to run an errand. The rain had increased, and she hesitated for a moment at the entrance of a small boutique, considering whether to go back for her forgotten umbrella. She chose to continue on, thinking it would not be far. That decision, seemingly inconsequential, made her vulnerable. A shadow moved along the opposite sidewalk, unnoticed by her but captured later by security cameras. The camera footage would later become one of the first important pieces of evidence in the investigation. As the afternoon passed, Emily's interactions were routine but precise, greeting a delivery person, chatting with a coworker, stopping at a newsstand to glance at the headlines. Yet beneath the ordinary surface, the day was gradually building toward disruption. Each ordinary action, recorded in the memories of witnesses or caught by street cameras, would later help investigators piece together not only what had happened but the meticulous pattern of the perpetrator's actions. By early evening, Emily left the office, her coat damp from the persistent rain. She followed a familiar path home, stopping only to admire the city's reflections in the puddles and the way the lamplight shimmered along the wet streets. The gentle rhythm of her steps and the ambient noise of the rain masked the presence of the figure who had been shadowing her movements. Each decision, each moment of ordinary behavior, now served as a critical pivot in the unfolding story, a sequence of events that would guide the investigators as they retraced her steps later that night. Seattle's rain continued to fall, persistent and quiet, as though the city itself were aware of the drama unfolding within its streets. By the time Emily reached her neighborhood, the ordinary day had taken on a sense of unease that she herself could not yet perceive. A single misstep, a glance, a moment's hesitation would soon intersect with the extraordinary, forever changing the life of Emily Parker and sparking an investigation that would grip the city for weeks to come. By the early evening, Emily had not returned home. Her younger brother, Jake, had already texted and called her several times, growing increasingly anxious when each attempt went unanswered. The familiar routine, Emily always sending a brief message if she would be late, had been broken. Concern turned into alarm. Their mother, Karen, paced the living room, her heart racing as she tried calling again and again. Michael, their father, checked the clock and then the window, scanning the rainy streets for any sign of his daughter. The city outside shimmered with reflections of streetlights and puddles, but offered no clue to her whereabouts. By 7 p.m., fear had escalated into action. The family contacted the Seattle Police Department, reporting Emily missing. Officers arrived quickly, taking statements, noting details about her last known movements, and asking questions that seemed both methodical and impossibly slow to a frantic family. Every question was a potential key to understanding what had happened, from the route she usually took home to the names of friends she might have contacted that evening. The first task for investigators was reconstructing Emily's last movements. Patrol officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors and questioning residents. Did anyone see her leave work? Did anyone notice a stranger? Were there unusual sounds, flashes of movement, or signs of struggle? Each witness added a fragment to the emerging picture. Some observations were clear and reliable, others were fleeting and contradictory, creating initial confusion. Security cameras from nearby stores and traffic intersections were reviewed meticulously. One camera caught a figure in a dark raincoat moving in a purposeful manner toward the park near Emily's route. Though it was only a brief image, it became one of the first tangible clues that would guide investigators. Meanwhile, Emily's family struggled to process the reality of the situation. Friends gathered at the Parker home, sharing stories, looking for reassurance, or simply hoping for news. The atmosphere was tense, even familiar sounds, the steady rhythm of rain against windows, the occasional siren in the distance, felt magnified, hauntingly echoing the uncertainty that had settled over the household. Karen tried to remain calm, but each unanswered call increased her anxiety. Jake, normally focused on schoolwork, now paced the rooms, replaying the day in his mind and searching for anything out of place. Detectives began compiling a timeline, meticulously piecing together details from phone records, office security logs, and witness accounts. They examined every angle: the brief stop at the cafe, the errands run in the late afternoon, the familiar paths Emily usually walked through the rain. Every detail mattered. The investigation moved forward deliberately, with methodical steps designed to uncover patterns, inconsistencies, and hidden truths. It became clear quickly that this was not a simple disappearance. The careful, deliberate nature of the break-in suggested planning, but little else pointed to the perpetrator's motives or identity. As the night wore on, the officers coordinated with forensic teams, photographing the apartment, collecting fingerprints, and searching for subtle clues that might explain how and why Emily had been targeted. Each discovery, no matter how small, was documented, catalogued, and analyzed. Every piece of evidence brought the investigators closer to understanding the night's events, but also revealed how intricate and challenging this case would become. Seattle, wrapped in its nightly rain, had become both a stage and a silent witness. The city's streets, shimmering under streetlights and reflecting the uncertainty of the unfolding mystery, would hold the key to the answers that Emily's family so desperately sought. And as the first threads of the investigation began to weave together, one truth became increasingly evident: the journey to uncover what had happened that rainy night would be long, complex, and filled with moments of revelation, frustration, and human resilience. The morning after Emily's disappearance, the Seattle Police Department launched a full-scale investigation. Detectives moved systematically, aware that in cases like this, every detail could make a difference between resolution and dead end. Forensic teams arrived, meticulously photographing the apartment, cataloging items, and checking for fingerprints, fibers, or any subtle trace that might reveal the perpetrator. Every surface, from door handles to window sills, was examined with precision, the quiet hum of scientific equipment punctuating the otherwise still apartment. Detectives began compiling a timeline of Emily's day, cross-referencing phone records, security footage, and witness statements. They reconstructed her movements from the office to the streets, noting the exact times she had interacted with colleagues, delivery personnel, and the barista at her favorite cafe. Even the brief pause at the newsstand became significant. Each detail, seemingly mundane, provided context for potential patterns of behavior, and ultimately, clues about who might have observed her that day. Officers canvassed the neighborhood extensively. They spoke to neighbors, shopkeepers, and commuters, asking about unusual activity or strangers. Some provided clear, helpful observations: a figure in a dark raincoat moving purposefully near the park, a gloved hand glimpsed through the rain-soaked evening. Others were fleeting memories, contradictory statements, or misperceptions. These false leads created initial frustration but also underscored the complexity of human observation under pressure. Meanwhile, detectives reviewed surveillance footage from multiple angles, from the streets Emily had walked to intersections near her apartment. One camera revealed a brief shadow following her, just at the edge of visibility, almost blending into the rain-soaked streets. Though the image was grainy, it became a key piece of the puzzle, hinting at a deliberate observer. Investigators enhanced the footage, examining movements frame by frame, trying to discern whether this figure had been watching Emily specifically or merely passing by. Forensic experts analyzed fibers found on Emily's coat and hair, matching them against common street materials, vehicle interiors, and even the fabric from nearby locations. Every result narrowed the possibilities, yet each also introduced new questions: was the fiber from the perpetrator, an innocent passerby, or Emily herself? Subtle clues multiplied, and investigators had to remain vigilant not to overinterpret coincidences. Witness interviews became an equally critical component. Some remembered Emily smiling at them, her raincoat slightly damp; others noticed a figure loitering near a park bench, shifting from one foot to the other, observing passers-by. Small details, like the color of a scarf, the rhythm of someone's steps, or the placement of an abandoned umbrella, became threads that detectives pulled to weave a clearer picture. These interactions also revealed patterns: the perpetrator seemed to have chosen specific locations, likely familiar with the neighborhood and Emily's habits. Despite meticulous work, false leads complicated progress. A local man, seen running near the park that night, matched part of the witness description but had a solid alibi. Another tip pointed to a delivery driver seen in the vicinity, but further investigation showed he was on a different route. Each misstep, each dead end, added tension and uncertainty to the case. Yet detectives remained patient, methodical, and committed, understanding that in complex investigations, perseverance often uncovered the smallest, most telling clue. The combined efforts of forensic experts, surveillance analysts, and street-level detectives gradually shaped the framework of the case. A timeline was forming, patterns began emerging, and a clearer picture of Emily's last hours took shape. The investigation was slow, deliberate, and exacting. Every fiber, every frame of video, every recollection of witnesses contributed to the careful reconstruction of the events that had occurred on that rainy Seattle night. As the investigation deepened, the city of Seattle began to buzz quietly with speculation. News of Emily Parker's disappearance had spread through neighbors and friends, and while the police worked tirelessly, rumors and assumptions swirled, sometimes complicating the inquiry. Detectives faced the delicate task of separating fact from conjecture, and of navigating a web of partial truths, mistaken recollections, and intentional distractions. The first suspect emerged from a simple eyewitness statement, a man seen pacing near the park where Emily had been observed moments before the incident. His dark raincoat and hurried pace matched a description from a witness, and his presence near the scene was enough to warrant a preliminary investigation. Officers quickly checked his background, interviewed him, and verified his movements. He had been meeting a friend, a simple alibi confirmed by security footage from a nearby cafe. Though cleared, his brief suspicion reminded the investigators of how quickly appearances could mislead. Another lead came from the delivery driver who had passed through Emily's neighborhood that evening. One witness remembered a vehicle idling near her usual walking route, and the driver's description seemed to fit. Police interviewed him thoroughly, tracing his route and questioning his colleagues. Though innocent, he admitted that the attention was unsettling. These moments, though frustrating, were vital. Each false lead forced investigators to refine their methods, cross-check facts, and develop a sharper eye for detail. Even among family and friends, small inconsistencies in recollections created tension. A neighbor mentioned hearing an argument around the time Emily had left work, which led detectives to question colleagues and clients. Nothing significant emerged, but the hint of conflict suggested that investigators had to consider every possibility. Emily's calm and predictable routines were now scrutinized for anomalies, and every deviation became a potential clue, or a trap for the unwary. Amid these misdirections, detectives began noticing patterns. Someone had clearly planned aspects of the crime, observing Emily's habits and choosing locations where she was most vulnerable. Security footage showed a shadowy figure following certain streets consistently, while forensic analysis revealed fibers and traces that hinted at premeditation. These findings suggested a methodical mind, but the identity of the individual remained elusive. Throughout these early weeks, the community's anxiety grew. Friends of Emily organized small search parties, local residents reported suspicious activity, and online forums buzzed with speculation. While the police welcomed public tips, not every piece of information led closer to the truth. Some tips were deliberate distractions, others, sincere but mistaken, slowed progress. Yet within this complex maze of leads and errors, detectives maintained focus, knowing that persistence and careful analysis would eventually reveal the critical thread. It was during this period of false leads and intense scrutiny that the investigation began to sharpen. The combination of forensic science, careful observation, and methodical interviewing began to filter out irrelevant information. Each dead end, each mistaken assumption, taught the detectives more about the nature of the crime and the careful calculation behind it. What initially seemed like confusion slowly became a roadmap, leading step by step toward the truth that would ultimately expose the person responsible. Seattle's rain continued to fall, steady and unwavering, washing the streets and the sidewalks, as though the city itself were silently observing. The clues were there, scattered and subtle, waiting for the investigators to connect them. And amidst the uncertainty, one fact remained clear: solving Emily Parker's disappearance would require patience, insight, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice. Weeks into the investigation, the case seemed to stall. Every lead had been examined, every false suspect cleared, and yet Emily Parker's disappearance remained unresolved. Detectives reviewed their notes late into the night, cross-referencing timelines, witness statements, and forensic reports. The rain continued to fall over Seattle, a steady backdrop to their methodical work, each drop mirroring the slow, deliberate progress of the investigation. Then, a breakthrough arrived in the form of a small, almost overlooked detail. One of the surveillance cameras along Emily's route had captured more than initially thought. When analysts enhanced the footage frame by frame, a fleeting reflection in a shop window revealed a figure's face, partially obscured by a hood but distinguishable enough to trigger recognition. It was subtle, nearly imperceptible, but to the trained eyes of the investigators, it was a critical clue, a window into the perpetrator's identity. Simultaneously, forensic specialists revisited trace evidence collected from Emily's coat and hair. Fibers previously considered generic were reanalyzed, revealing a rare pattern consistent with a particular type of outdoor jacket sold only at a few specialty stores in the city. Cross-referencing this information with recent sales, the investigators identified a small pool of potential individuals who had purchased such a jacket. The detective team combined these findings with the witness accounts. Several neighbors had reported seeing a hooded figure near Emily's usual walking paths, sometimes loitering for no apparent reason. When compared with the surveillance reflection and the jacket analysis, a clearer pattern emerged. The perpetrator had been following Emily for days, observing her routines, calculating the right moment. It was deliberate, controlled, and chilling in its precision. Further analysis revealed another layer. Digital footprints showed that someone had tracked Emily's social media posts, her location check-ins, and even the time she had left the office each day. These subtle, modern forms of surveillance explained the meticulous nature of the crime. The perpetrator had studied her patterns carefully, knowing when she would be most vulnerable, when the streets would be quiet, and when no one would be around to notice. With this combination of physical and digital evidence, detectives narrowed their focus. A suspect list, once sprawling and tangled in false leads, had been reduced to a handful of individuals. Interviews intensified, alibis were checked and rechecked, and a profile of the perpetrator began to emerge: methodical, observant, familiar with the neighborhood, and patient enough to wait for the perfect opportunity. The atmosphere in the precinct shifted. What had seemed like an endless search now felt tangible, a case moving closer to resolution. For Emily's family, the breakthrough offered cautious hope. Investigators reassured them that the pieces were finally coming together, that the perpetrator was no longer invisible. And for the detectives, the realization was both exhilarating and sobering. Each detail, each overlooked moment, had been crucial in bringing the truth within reach. Seattle's rain continued unabated, cascading over streets and rooftops, washing the city but leaving the tension intact. In the quiet of the precinct, detectives worked tirelessly, connecting dots that had once seemed disparate. The investigation, once stalled and obscured by false leads, had found its path forward. And now, with clarity beginning to emerge, the city itself seemed to lean in, awaiting the moment when the identity of the person responsible for Emily Parker's disappearance would finally be revealed. As the investigation progressed, detectives began to construct a detailed psychological profile of the individual responsible for Emily Parker's disappearance. The evidence suggested meticulous planning, patience, and a striking familiarity with Emily's routines and the neighborhood. The perpetrator was not impulsive; each step had been calculated, measured, and timed to minimize the risk of detection. The profile painted a picture of someone methodical, observant, and socially adept enough to blend seamlessly into the city around them. They understood human behavior, predicting Emily's reactions, her habits, and her likely paths home. They exploited ordinary routines, the small pause at a cafe, the forgotten umbrella, the quiet street corners, to create opportunities. These were not the acts of random violence, but of careful, calculated orchestration. Forensic psychologists suggested that the perpetrator exhibited traits of control and obsession. There was a fixation on Emily's patterns, an intense attention to detail, and a willingness to wait for extended periods to achieve the desired outcome. Yet, despite the unsettling nature of these behaviors, there was no indication of uncontrolled aggression. The crime had been executed with precision and restraint, reflecting a complex, deliberate mindset rather than reckless violence. Investigators also examined digital behavior. The perpetrator had monitored social media, noting check-ins, posts, and routines, blending modern technology with classic surveillance tactics. They understood the value of subtlety, knowing that the smallest observable action could provide critical information without raising suspicion. The combination of patience, observation, and calculated risk-taking indicated not only intelligence but also a methodical obsession with control. Interviews with neighbors and eyewitnesses revealed additional traits. The perpetrator was cautious yet confident, moving through public spaces with ease, observing from a distance without drawing attention. This ability to exist in plain sight while maintaining a hidden agenda highlighted a psychological sophistication that made the individual particularly elusive. Detectives realized that understanding the perpetrator's mindset would be essential for predicting the next move. Patterns began to emerge from the evidence, specific times, locations, and behaviors repeated in a subtle, deliberate manner. By combining forensic evidence with psychological insight, the team could anticipate potential locations, predict behaviors, and narrow the focus of their surveillance and interviews. Ultimately, the psychological profile did more than describe the perpetrator, it provided a roadmap. It revealed how careful planning, methodical observation, and patient execution could converge to create a crime that was both terrifying in its precision and subtle in its execution. The profile became a critical tool, guiding investigators toward the individual responsible and setting the stage for the eventual capture that would bring closure to Emily Parker's family and the city that had held its breath through weeks of uncertainty. Seattle's rain continued to fall, relentless and steady, as if echoing the persistent pursuit of justice. Every drop reflected the careful, deliberate progress of the investigation. Each new insight into the perpetrator's mind brought detectives closer to resolution, illuminating the method behind the crime and preparing them for the next step, tracking, confrontation, and the moment when the truth would finally surface. With the psychological profile in hand and the new evidence analyzed, detectives intensified surveillance. The city of Seattle became a landscape of careful observation. Officers monitored key locations, watched traffic cameras, and coordinated with neighbors and colleagues of Emily Parker. Every interaction, every movement of potential suspects was scrutinized. The rain continued to fall, draping the city in a reflective, almost cinematic quality, masking the quiet but relentless pursuit of justice. It was during this phase that one individual began to stand out. A man in his mid-30s, known to some neighbors as quiet and unremarkable, had purchased the distinctive jacket identified in the forensic analysis. He had no immediate connection to Emily, yet his pattern suggested familiarity with the neighborhood and routines matching those inferred from surveillance footage. Detectives watched him carefully, documenting each movement, recording behaviors, and noting interactions. One evening, the team observed the suspect leaving a small apartment complex near Capitol Hill. His movements were deliberate but measured, as though aware of the possibility of being watched. Using a combination of physical surveillance and digital monitoring, detectives traced his path through the city, identifying places where he might have prepared or concealed evidence. The network of small details, the reflections in windows, the shadows in alleyways, the faint sounds of movement in the rain, gradually converged into a coherent pattern, pointing unequivocally toward the suspect's involvement. The decision to act was made cautiously. Detectives planned a coordinated operation to avoid confrontation and ensure safety. Teams were positioned around the suspect's location, communications were synchronized, and backup units were ready. Every step was calculated, informed by the insights gathered over weeks of investigation. When the arrest was finally executed, it was precise and swift. Officers approached the suspect's apartment quietly, announcing their presence and requesting compliance. The man, realizing he had been observed and cornered, did not resist violently. His reaction was a mixture of resignation and disbelief, the calm exterior masking a sudden awareness that his meticulous planning had been undone. He was handcuffed and read his rights, the reality of the investigation closing in on him after weeks of careful preparation. As the suspect was led into the police vehicle, detectives reviewed the evidence they had gathered. Every step of his movements had been documented, every subtle trace of his actions preserved. The arrest was not just the culmination of painstaking investigation, but a moment of vindication for Emily's family and for the city that had watched in quiet tension. Emily Parker's parents and brother were informed immediately. The relief and tentative hope in their eyes reflected the emotional weight of the weeks of uncertainty. The arrest was a pivotal moment, not just a procedural victory, but a human one. It marked the first step toward understanding, toward accountability, and ultimately, toward justice. Even as the rain fell, steady and uninterrupted, Seattle seemed to exhale. The city that had been silent and watchful for so long bore witness to the resolution of a complex, tense pursuit. The perpetrator, once a shadow moving unnoticed through ordinary streets, was now in custody. The investigation had reached its turning point, setting the stage for the courtroom and the final reckoning that would follow. The trial of the man responsible for Emily Parker's disappearance began in a Seattle courtroom a few months after his arrest. The city, still marked by the memory of the rainy night and the ensuing investigation, followed the proceedings with quiet intensity. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was a careful balance of solemnity and tension, as attorneys, witnesses, and family members prepared for the unfolding of months of painstakingly gathered evidence. Prosecutors presented the meticulous investigation in chronological order. Security footage, enhanced and analyzed, demonstrated the suspect's deliberate movements. Forensic evidence, from fibers on Emily's coat to traces of materials found near his apartment, was displayed in detail, connecting him undeniably to the scene. Digital footprints revealed careful tracking of Emily's routines, highlighting the planning and premeditation that defined the crime. Each piece of evidence built a narrative of control, obsession, and deliberate intrusion into Emily's life. Witnesses testified, recounting their observations, the shadowy figure near the park, the interactions in the neighborhood, and the fleeting but crucial details captured on cameras. Emily's colleagues spoke to her predictable routines, her cautious nature, and the ordinary decisions that the perpetrator had exploited. These personal recollections gave depth to the investigation, showing the human side of the story, the life interrupted, the ordinary patterns turned vulnerable. The defense attempted to challenge the evidence, questioning witness reliability and suggesting alternative interpretations. Yet the combination of physical, digital, and testimonial evidence proved overwhelming. The jury, guided by the methodical presentation, could see the pattern emerge clearly. It was a calculated and deliberate crime, executed with foresight and precision. Throughout the trial, Emily's family attended every session. Karen and Michael Parker maintained a composed exterior, though their eyes revealed the weight of weeks spent in fear and uncertainty. Jake, quieter and more introspective, absorbed every detail, seeking understanding and closure. The courtroom proceedings were not just a legal formality, they were a culmination of the emotional journey the family had endured, a public recognition of the gravity of the crime and the perseverance of those who had sought the truth. After days of testimony and careful deliberation, the jury reached a verdict, guilty on all charges. The judge delivered the sentence in a firm, measured voice, underscoring the seriousness of the offense and the justice sought on behalf of Emily Parker. The perpetrator showed little outward emotion, his calm exterior reflecting the meticulous control that had characterized his actions from the beginning. For the family, however, the verdict brought relief, a sense that the months of uncertainty and fear were finally met with resolution. The community, too, felt the impact. Neighbors expressed support for the Parker family, local media recounted the details of the case, and discussions about safety, awareness, and vigilance in everyday routines became common. The crime had been shocking, but the investigation and subsequent trial highlighted the effectiveness of careful, persistent law enforcement and the resilience of a community facing uncertainty. The trial underscored a fundamental truth: justice is rarely instantaneous, often requiring patience, persistence, and careful attention to detail. The process revealed not only the methodical nature of the crime but also the dedication of those committed to uncovering the truth, proving that even in the most challenging cases, justice can be achieved through diligence and human determination. Seattle's rain continued to fall, soft and steady, a quiet witness to the conclusion of a chapter marked by fear, investigation, and eventual resolution. The city, reflective and somber, bore testament to the intricate interplay of human behavior, the persistence of law enforcement, and the enduring hope that truth and accountability will prevail. The weeks and months following the trial were a period of reflection, healing, and adjustment for Emily Parker's family and the wider Seattle community. The verdict had brought justice, but the emotional ripples of the crime remained. Karen and Michael Parker navigated the quiet routines of their home with a mix of relief and lingering grief, acutely aware that life would never return entirely to its previous normalcy. Jake, too, processed the experience quietly, finding solace in the resilience of his family and the support of friends who had stood by them throughout the investigation. Neighbors and colleagues shared in the emotional aftermath. Some offered small gestures, warm meals, notes of encouragement, or quiet conversations in the evenings, that reinforced the sense of community solidarity. While the crime had introduced fear and uncertainty, the response of the people around Emily's family demonstrated compassion, empathy, and the enduring human capacity for care in the face of tragedy. The city itself, often perceived as impersonal and bustling, revealed moments of connectedness and support that lingered beyond the courtrooms and police reports. The investigation and subsequent trial also highlighted broader lessons. Routine decisions, seemingly trivial in everyday life, could intersect with danger in unforeseen ways. Awareness, caution, and vigilance became topics of discussion among local residents, encouraging a culture of attentiveness while fostering resilience rather than fear. Emily's story, though marked by tragedy, became a narrative about the power of observation, the importance of methodical action, and the value of community engagement in times of uncertainty. On a philosophical level, the case prompted reflection on the nature of justice, human behavior, and accountability. The meticulous planning of the perpetrator contrasted sharply with the dedication and diligence of the investigators. It revealed how both darkness and light coexist in human society, and how, through patience, empathy, and methodical effort, balance and resolution could be restored. The crime underscored that evil, no matter how calculated, could be confronted and contained through human determination and moral courage. Emily Parker's life, though interrupted, left a lasting imprint. Her meticulous routines, her attention to detail, and her quiet kindness had not only shaped the investigation but also served as a reminder of the depth and nuance of ordinary human existence. The community, strengthened by the collective experience, carried forward a sense of shared responsibility and vigilance, reaffirming the importance of empathy, justice, and human connection. Seattle, enveloped in its persistent rain, seemed reflective in these months. Each drop symbolized continuity, the passage of time, and the quiet persistence of life. While the crime had been a disruption, the response, rooted in compassion, diligence, and accountability, illustrated that even in the aftermath of darkness, resilience and justice could prevail. Emily Parker's story, though marked by fear and uncertainty, ultimately became a testament to resilience, human connection, and the power of careful, persistent action. The months of investigation, the painstaking attention to detail, and the eventual capture of the perpetrator had restored justice, yet the journey left lasting impressions on all involved. Her family continued to heal, finding strength in one another and in the support of the community. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues carried forward the memory of Emily's life, the quiet attentiveness, the careful observation, and the warmth she brought to everyday moments. Her routines, once ordinary, became emblematic of how ordinary lives can intersect with extraordinary circumstances, shaping events in profound ways. The case also reinforced the importance of empathy, vigilance, and diligence. The detectives' relentless pursuit of truth, combined with the meticulous forensic work and the insights gleaned from witnesses, highlighted that even the most complex challenges could be overcome through patience and dedication. The story reminded the city and its people that justice, though sometimes slow, is achievable, and that the human capacity for care and perseverance can illuminate even the darkest situations. Seattle, wrapped in its gentle rain, seemed to exhale along with those who followed Emily's story. The streets, once a backdrop to uncertainty, now reflected continuity, resilience, and the quiet rhythm of life moving forward. Each drop of rain mirrored the steady passage of time, washing away fear while leaving the lessons of the experience intact. And so, the story finds its place not only in the records of law enforcement or the memories of a family but also in the broader reflections on human life, the ordinary details, the small gestures, the choices we make each day, they matter. Even when circumstances are overwhelming, clarity, justice, and resolution are possible. And now, as the rain continues its soft, steady descent over the city, let your mind rest. Imagine the gentle patter on rooftops, the reflective shimmer on the sidewalks, and the quiet streets of Seattle settling into the calm of night. Sometimes, even the most complex stories find their resolution, and the world returns to balance. Let the sounds of rain guide you gently into sleep, carrying with them the quiet assurance that, in time, truth and peace can prevail.